So this is what's really happening right now.
Yeah, perfect. And I think really, building on what Atif just said, clearly we in our own labs, but more generally in the industry, have seen is just a significant rise in phishing itself, as Randy highlighted. More importantly, I would say targeted spear phishing. And spear phishing is one of how can I individually target you as a particular user within a corporation, or as Randy noted, certainly as a consumer. And with that, obviously, if I have behavioral information or your personal information, who you work for, who works for you, what vendors you work with, coupled with the fact that I can now launch attacks very, very quickly, targeted, again, specifically for you. And one other point I would make, not just do that in email, right? I think commonly people think of phishing and email as one and the same. It's not. In fact, again, in our labs, we are seeing significant increase in other what we call digital communication channels, whether that be LinkedIn, whether that be WhatsApp, whether that be personal email, and you get crossover attacks that obviously are meant to be a targeted spearfish. Again, it looks like it comes from a domain, a reputable domain like google.com or Microsoft. And in that context, you look at it, you can't train a user out of looking at this because, again, it looks like a legitimate attack from a legitimate domain, and you start getting distracted, right? You get an SMS that has another piece, right? Another attack in it. You get a LinkedIn, you get a message from Facebook Messenger, you go into Slack. Bottom line, we're very busy. We're also very distracted. And with that, we've seen significant increase in the success of targeted spear phishing. And that has led to downstream ransomware. And these are some very eye-opening stats. I'll just point out a few of these. Again, we've seen a 350% increase in phishing in 2020. This goes right to that heart of the converged nature. We're working from everywhere, working from, right, again, from home, in and out of our business and personal lives at the same time. Kids distraction, school distraction. Bottom line, just a significant increase, and the bad actors know this. A couple other points I would make here on these stats. We've seen a 78% increase in what we call supply chain attacks. These are effectively vendor compromise attacks where someone gets into a trusted chain of communication from a vendor perspective. So it looks like it came from someone you're working with upstream in your vendor community or downstream in your customers. And in fact, even at the last company, I had POs sent to basically customers that sent POs to the wrong destination, right? So this is really a very strong and growing problem. I think the other point I'd make on phishing itself is 91% of successful cyber attacks begin with a fish, a targeted spearfish. Think about that for a moment. Obviously, we've seen these headlines out there from the beef attack, again, the pipeline attack. These all started with targeted spearfishing. And just as important, if you look at the other side of this fact, right, every 11 seconds, a new ransomware attack is launched. And again, this is FBI estimate or global cost estimate, about $20 billion alone were sacrificed in or paid in ransom this last year. So bottom line, is a very significant problem. The two are phishing, and again, more importantly, probably it's targeted spear phishing and ransomware really are that marriage made in hell, or as I said, heaven, if you're looking at it from a hacker perspective. And again, I just mentioned these pointed headlines out there. If you dissect, as an example, the Colonial Pipeline attack, look at where it started, that kill chain, as we like to talk. Where did it start? Stage zero. Stage zero started with a spearfish, which compromised credentials. Those credentials were then used to use a client VPN, to then use a client VPN access to the network, and then obviously lay in wait the ransomware. And Randy, as I think as you had, we were talking yesterday, you're seeing actually a special type of, again, kind of the double attack where they're basically downloading the data. Maybe you spend a few moments to talk about that, and then I'll obviously spend a few more moments on some of these latest headlines.
Yeah, so they call it double extortion now, and essentially what it is it's forcing a customer to pay for the ransom to unencrypt their data, but they actually exfiltrate the data before they encrypt it. So then they force the victim to pay essentially another ransom to ensure they don't release that data. And this is, I think it was started by Maze, but it's also been picked up by Revol and some of the other threat actors that are using ransomware. And essentially it's a good way to double dip on a single attack. And this is it gets to multiple things, because you also have compliance issues that come in with anything that's disclosed, which raises up again the amount of ransom they can demand, because it's going to create more hardship for the company. So we don't really know yet if any information was stolen from Colonial or from JBS that could be ransomed back to the company. But you see the amounts of money that these organizations are paying, 11 million, $4 million. That doesn't count anything that they'll pay in addition for the I guess the lack of disclosure from those ransomware groups.
Yeah, so I think to this point, so even backup can somewhat be compromised, because everyone obviously backs up their data in their systems. But if they're taking that data in advance and then encrypting it on both sides, or obviously you're doing ransom, you really do have a problem. As this notes, these are obviously almost like the daily headlines. It's interesting. I was just down in Southern California at a volleyball tournament with my son. Yeah, I was talking next to a doctor at a hospital, a big hospital down in San Diego. He's like, listen, our critical care unit was offline. In fact, they had to shut down the whole hospital for 28 days because there was a phishing exploit that then led to a ransomware and took all the systems off. So even the headlines you don't see, think about that for a moment. It really is very pervasive, very important to be able to look at this. So again, to this point, maybe Atif and again, Randy, we can talk about why is phishing at the heart of ransomware attacks? Why is do you look at it as so successful at the start of that at the beginning of this process? Randy, I'll let you answer that first, and then I'll switch over to Atif.
Sure. I mean, I go back to the fact that phishing works. And you just laid out a ton of statistics that say that phishing is alive and well. It's working, and users really just want to do their job. So what's interesting is there were phishing emails that went out about Colonial Pipeline, about the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack that contained ransomware in them. So these attackers, they're using relevant data to today. And it elicits users to click. I mean, take COVID, for example. It's a small thing that's been happening over the last year and a half or so, but that was a huge boom for a lot of attackers to attach a file that says COVID test results, and they were embedding either callbacks to download ransomware or the ransomware directly to the email. So when you can contextualize your attack so much that your users really have either little doubt or added incentive in clicking on an attachment or a link, you're going to get a higher hit rate. And when it comes to ransomware, like I said, even if you get a small percentage, a small percentage is enough to elicit a pretty big gain. And with an organization, you really only need one good box to get popped to ransom that entire company.
And to that point, Randy, obviously people, as I mentioned before, somewhat associate phishing with email. Maybe you can comment how you're now starting to see those attacks again in LinkedIn and other channels. So you want to just give a little bit of context there?
Yeah, I mean, phishing and email have somewhat become synonymous. And my personal belief is that's because people figured out how to do something around email, but they could never really figure out how to do something around any of these other attack vectors. So we're starting to see LinkedIn become used more and more. There was a recent bit of malware that was going out via what looked to be job offers. So they would actually pull your title from LinkedIn, and then they would attach that to a job offer. So it would say, a security analyst job offer. You click on that and there's a backdoor that got installed. We saw North Korea using this to try to partner up with security researchers and essentially backdoor their 0 days or their vulnerabilities that they were researching. So LinkedIn is going to be used more and more. And then Facebook is also getting used. They were used to deliver a ransomware payload. And the unique thing about Facebook is a lot of folks don't access, or they access more commonly from their personal device. They don't really access Facebook from their work device. So when you're looking at the Facebook attack vector or Gmail or some of the more consumer facing SaaS apps, you're talking about assets that the company doesn't even control, but I guarantee you there's something that links the user back to the company, whether it's, hey, I also installed Outlook on this, or I'm using the same passwords, or I log into OWA, and a backdoor will give me just as easy access to the company as going through a company asset, which may be more protected. So this is really going to surface the whole idea of everybody's saying it. The attack surface is melted, right? It's fragmented. It's everywhere. There is no more perimeter. This is really just extending that out to the perimeter is the user, and any device they use is an attack surface.
Yeah, no, great points. And I think to that context, as I mentioned before, if you really think about your daily life, and particularly this last year of COVID, think about that common, again, you go from your business life, personal life, all within the same 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and you're going in and out. And as Randy noted, you may be using the same password. We showed in a couple of Phish stories ago at Phish Stories 4 on how to break multi-factor authentication. Again, how these bad actors are embedding themselves there. But a lot of that does also come with effectively what I call crossover attacks, coming in on these personal communication channels where you're getting phished, crossing over into the corporate side. And that's why it has become extremely dangerous. And Atif, do you want to spend just a few moments talking about what is so dangerous now about phishing, social engineering versus before? What are the tools that these guys are using?
Yeah, I think they're too dangerous. First of all, there are a lot more payloads. I mean, back in the day, it was all about stealing your password, right? But now, I mean, there are other payloads. Ransomware is there. I mean, money transfer scams are there, rogueware, browser extensions. So the variety of payloads is actually making it a lot more dangerous, right? Because end of the day, all you have to entice people to click on something, right? And previously it was just one or two options, right? Now the worst case scenario is a lot more. So that is one thing that is making it dangerous. The second thing is that protection. I mean, on one hand, you think that, okay, look, I mean, the catching phishing would be a lot more difficult about 15 years ago, and now it should be easy because we humans evolve and learn, right? But the problem is that it has become much more complicated and hard to detect, right? First of all, multi-vector, right? I mean, you have all the phishing solution focused on email. Okay, just imagine that those solutions are 100% perfect, right? But then all those gaps are going to let the bad guys in, right? So first of all, multi-vector is making it extremely difficult to offer substantial protection for user. And secondly, even within the email of your current defenses that they're supposed to stop all these attacks, I think they're making things a lot harder for email gateways. We are seeing a lot of phishing attacks being launched from legitimate cloud services like Google Drive, SharePoint, and Adobe is also becoming very popular, Box, Dropbox, right? So even within email, domain, we are seeing that it's becoming harder and harder for email security gateways to stop. I mean, I use Office 365. I get 2 or 3 different phishing emails in a week, right? And so it doesn't look like that is working, nor on the email side, neither on the other communication vector side.
Yeah, so really,
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, so I think what you're really getting to, number one, as you can see on the left-hand side here, the bad actors have available tools to them, probably unlike any time in history, where I can go to GitHub, get a $100 or $500 kit. I can marry that with personal information that we talked about, where I can map you as a user, both from your personal life, but also your business life. I can then nest, in many respects, the reason why I like to call what we do at SlashNext, why it's called SlashNext, these guys are nesting these attacks deep in domains. And so it could be google.com///next, right? And that is where the attack. So that attack looks like it's coming from that legitimate hosted infrastructure. And then it's being automated, right? It's coming out minute by minute, not just days and weeks. It's no longer, again, this spray and pray that I think, Randy, you referred to. And that's the reason why it's become very successful. And Atif, to that point, you're seeing these not only come out minute by minute, and they may live 24 hours, 48 hours. So what you're saying, you have to be able to catch that at the time of almost creation. B, you have to look at the broad nature of the payloads of these attacks. And C, you have to look at these communication channels they're coming from. Is that fair?
That's right. Yeah.